Welcome back to the Fantasy Formula One podcast. I am Paul. That's Ben. Thank you for joining this conversation. It is a conversation we'd be having anyway.
Absolutely.
So feel free to reach out to us on the social medias at Fantasy Formula One Podcast or email us to info@fantasyformula1podcast.com.
Let us know if we're wrong. We can take it.
We can take it. I was like, I've been wrong once before. It was a drizzly Tuesday.
I remember. No. It was,
So last episode we talked about, just kind of went over the races, the winners, the losers, things like that. And now we get to talk about all things fantasy specific, including, but I want to kick us off with the most important, the biggest thing that we could not have anticipated this week, and that was Alex Albon crashing and then changing over, taking Logan Sargent's car, and the implications for the fantasy stuff, because I'm a huge believer in Logan Sargent, less believer in Alex Albon, because Alex Albon's $7 million or whatever, and Logan Sargent's like $5 million.
and you know what? I would argue that is on par with the Max Verstappen dropping out.
Think so?
I do because you know if you I want to say last week, but 2 weeks ago we talked about how you need Red Bull as a constructor,
Absolutely,
but you shouldn't have Max because having both the constructor and the driver makes the rest of your team too cost prohibitive to be effective. So if you didn't have Max, no biggie.
Yeah.
But if you did, Red Bull hurts you.
Yeah.
Bad.
And if you had Red Bull as a constructor like I did, so I didn't have Max Verstappen on any of my teams.
Okay, right? I had him on one. And so I got the DNF penalty twice over because I had both Red Bull and Max. And I had a couple of additional transfer penalties.
Okay.
Because I had done some knee-jerk reaction changes, and so
I used a wild card in there.
Gotcha.
Of course, just to nullify some of those. But in Australia, Red Bull still got 32 points.
They did
as a constructor.
Yeah, because Perez comes in with 5th place.
Yeah.
And that's not too shabby, especially compared to if you have Mercedes as your constructor.
So if I look at let me go look at results.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got lost halfway through my thought there. And so
no, you're fine.
No, the reason I think though the Albon Sargent switch out is a big deal is that can potentially impact 2 of your driver spots.
Yes. And the big issue with that is, as soon as you put to your point, if you had like me, you had Williams on both, right? Well, then if you had, as soon as it came out in the middle of FP2, it was like, oh no, Alex Albon, his car's not going to make it.
Right.
He won't be able to drive. Then you think, oh my gosh, Alex Albon's going to be replaced. Alex Albon won't be driving. I need to change it. If you then changed him for like a Haas. Now Alex Albon's not on your team.
Right.
Logan Sargent is.
Now this week, if you had gone with Haas, that wouldn't have hurt you.
That would not have hurt you at all.
Sorry.
Yeah, no.
But that being said,
but then as soon as they're like, well, no, now he's in and Logan Sargent's out.
Yeah.
Now Logan Sargent's not racing, and if you want to get Alex Albon back on your team, you have to use another change.
Right.
And so if in this instance, it would have cost you double changes or negative 20 points if you'd already used all your changes. Or you've had to use like a wild card or something.
And if you did that, you're not an idiot because you waited until after free practice to make your change, and then it comes out, oh no, Albon's still in, Sargent's out, and so if you had one or both of them now you have to ask yourself, is it worth burning myself on points to make yet another change, or do I just kind of stick with what I've got and hope that it doesn't go into the negative?
Yeah,
and it's really demoralizing to make driver selections based on the hope that they don't hurt you rather than how can these guys help me.
Right.
And that's that's the position I found myself in is when I found out Logan was out, I had already made changes early in the week based on what I thought was smart. And so I actually already also to the point where I was facing some penalties already. So I ended up leaving Logan on 2 of my teams because 0 points is better than automatic -10.
And I would go a step further. I even on the teams where I put the wild card in where I could have got a free switch.
Yeah.
I didn't. I kept Logan on 2. He's on 2 of my 3 fantasy teams, and he stayed there.
Yeah.
Even with an inactive, even when I had the ability to change him. And the reason is you will use one change to get him off your team and another change to get him back on.
Right.
And as soon as you can pay $5.6 million to decrease your liability, but also like, let's face it, Logan Sargent and the more bottom tier fantasy drivers, if they get you 10 points, that's huge.
Well, and that's the thing, as much he's our countryman. As much as we love the guy, he's not at that level yet where you can count on him to pass 5 people and get into the points
exactly
to make it worth that -10.
Yeah, he's come a long way from the start of the season.
Oh,
and
for
he's going
sure.
to continue to go, and I promise you, like, I'm riding his value as he goes up. Like, I'm not getting rid of him.
Yeah.
Just because his value is going to go up, he's always doing better and better, and so absolutely. But as soon as you had taken him to transfer him off your team, that would have been negative points. To your point, I would much rather just take the 0 and know he wasn't going to hurt me, know he wasn't going to help me, but then make it so I didn't need to move him again for the next race coming up.
Yeah,
in Japan.
On that front, I'm sorry to have interrupted you there.
No, go for it.
On that front, while we're talking Williams and Albon and switching out cars with Sargent and that level of teamsmanship, and then also taking a lateral look over to Haas, who's using so much more of a team format versus an individual racer format. In the previous episode, you had asked me to remind you about team strategy.
Oh, yes.
And so let before we jump into the train wreck of my teams this week, can you speak on that a little bit?
Yes. So as soon as Max Verstappen was out, and I don't have like exact quotes that made me think it, as soon as Max Verstappen was out, multiple teams started talking team orders. Like Ferrari started talking team orders. McLaren started talking team orders. McLaren went to a different strategy and tried to do an undercut with, I think it was Oscar Piastri or Lando Norris, one of them.
Earlier on
in the race.
Piastri was leading too, and I know there was talk to prioritize Norris, which again had to be a little uncomfortable, especially you're in Australia doing well, and you have a chance for the podium potentially. So
he talked to prioritize Norris. Then you had Haas. There was a switch with Haas as well.
Okay,
and so everybody just started racing a different race, because it was no longer Max's first and we're competing for the table scraps. It was anything can happen.
Yeah. And
let's start doing this smart, because now as soon as you and me are on a team, and let's say you and I are both Haas, well, we have McLaren with 2 drivers, Mercedes with 2 drivers, Ferrari with 2 drivers. There's 6 of the 8 spots, right?
Yeah.
And you have Red Bull with 2 drivers, right? Or did I already say Red Bull? Punchline is you have McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, and McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull. There's 8 of your top 10 spots.
Yep.
And so for me as a Haas or a Williams, we're fighting the only middle of the track team, which is Aston Martin, to try and get one of those last 2 spots that should go with Aston Martin, might go with a really fast other driver.
Yeah.
As soon as Max Verstappen's out, well, now everybody in the top 6 is going to be muscling and trying to get those higher points.
Oh, of course.
Because even if you can't win, my normal 4th will now get me a podium.
Yep.
My normal 11th will now put me in the points. So everybody started racing smarter. And then as soon as Lewis Hamilton went out with the power unit issue, it restacked everything again, because now all of a sudden your Kick Saubers, your Alpines, all this,
we've got a chance
at points.
Yep.
And everybody swallowed their pride and started being, you just kind of noticed in this conversation, I remember seeing, like, you see cars pass each other for no reason. You see no reason in quotes. Then you see Fernando Alonso get out of the way for somebody to pass him without a fight. Why? Because he wanted to save his tires, and he was thinking 40 laps ahead, not right now in this minute, because there's everything was a lot better chance. So,
sure.
So for this, it was a lot bigger of a thing I noticed. As soon as Max Verstappen was out, all that whole vibe changed.
Yeah. So understanding that Williams was only driving with 1 car this race, which is, man, what a missed opportunity, because this is the one time you've got half of Red Bull and no Mercedes.
Yeah.
And so I think, if you want to overread into everything,
sure,
the fact that Haas grabbed two spots where they get points, that says a lot about them. That says a lot about their communication. It says a lot about their potential to take advantage of what limited opportunities that they get. So in that smaller pond that they're in that lower tier, there's I think there's a lot of solid reason to put some hope in them. So again, when you find yourself with that $7 or $8 million left in your fantasy team budget, you could do a lot worse than picking either one of the Haas drivers.
For sure. And I do want to point this out. So Max Verstappen. So I'm looking at the different results for the different constructors.
Okay.
Right. To anybody who's like, man, I can't believe Red Bull, man, they're no good now because of whatever. We got to look out. Well, no. So Red Bull had 32 points.
Yeah.
McLaren had 54. So what hurt Red Bull this time around was the fact that Max Verstappen got that negative 20.
Yeah, absolutely.
As soon as Max Verstappen had issues but finished 10th, right? Red Bull would have then, if everything had been the same, but instead of Max Verstappen not being able to getting a DNF, if they had been able just to fix a tire and then he comes back in at P18 and fights his way up to P12.
Oh, yeah.
Then at that point, Red Bull would have been huge in the points.
Absolutely.
Because of how well he qualified. So the idea of having Red Bull as your constructor is still the smart play. This is one data point out of the last 40, right? He is still the prospect, not the suspect. So do not worry about Red Bull. They are doing fine.
Yep.
In the absence of Red Bull, McLaren and Ferrari are both of the ones gunning for it. So yeah, the point from last month of last week's episodes of you for your constructors, you want Ferrari, you want Red Bull. That still stands true this week because Red Bull didn't do so hot. The most winningest points you could have gotten, aside from using a chip, would have been to have just Ferrari as a constructor and both Ferrari drivers.
Yeah,
and then have Haas as your other team. That is not standard. Haas, yes, they got you a couple good points. And because both of the Ferrari drivers did so well and because Ferrari did so well, if you remove Red Bull from the equation, then yes, that is the right way to go.
Sure.
But Red Bull's not removed from the equation. They were removed here.
Exactly.
So as soon as Red Bull, if next race, there's another mechanical issue for Max Verstappen, well, now we're looking at it.
Let's talk about something.
Then let's talk about it. But right now, there's no reason to change all of that.
No, this is one. It happens. This is a case of this happens to everybody. And it just happened to be their turn.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, but I do want to talk about is a little bit of McLaren.
Okay.
Because McLaren, I haven't been talking too highly about them. Recently, I've been saying really nice things about McLaren recently because I've been calling them overpriced.
Sure,
because they're priced as a top. They're arguably a top 4 team, and as soon as you decrease Lando Norris's value at all, you snag him up. As soon as he's worth $15 million, you want him. As soon as he's worth $23 million, you can't afford him, and it's not an issue. But do you think that? Let me ask you.
Yeah.
Now that Mercedes is having so many issues, forget Max Verstappen, right? He should have been fine. It was a one-time issue. I don't want to factor that into the calculus.
Sure.
Mercedes engine issues that led to Lewis Hamilton being knocked out, and that put George Russell in a position where he is being ballsy trying to get 6th place. What is your thoughts about McLaren now and how their value is increasing or decreasing?
I think you took the words out of my mouth as you started to craft that question. Is that I don't think you can talk about McLaren's rise in potential value or the strength of their performance without talking about the concerns with Mercedes.
Okay.
So on their own, I would say McLaren's competitive. That's great. They remain pricey. Mm-hmm. And there are enough solid driver and constructor options above them. And as we talked about earlier in the season, when you put your team together, you have to go constructor first and then driver second. So again, so based on that methodology, I do think Lando Norris is still a little expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, my concerns with Mercedes are such that if I have, my plan would be if I have any element of them remaining on my fantasy teams, I would drop them in favor of trying to find financial space for McLaren because their performance has been consistently on the rise. They are taking the biggest scraps that they can find,
mm-hmm.
or that are available and it seems to be Mercedes who is offering those scraps up, where they have typically been in the top 3 historically. So I would say I am definitely heating up on McLaren versus Mercedes.
So ranking 1, 2, 3, 4 in the top 4, top tier teams, right? You have your Red Bull, you have Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, and Red Bull.
Mm-hmm.
Ranking them 1, 2, 3, 4 without looking at. So I have up on my computer that Ben can't see.
Yeah,
I have the official standings of the officially fantasy Formula One constructor standings.
Gotcha.
How would you, before we talk about what theirs is, how would you rank them?
Right now, I'd put McLaren 3.
Okay.
And I'm sorry. So yeah, Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes.
So you'd have Red Bull in first. As far as faith, like we're not worried about exact numbers. Or
gotcha. Yeah, no,
as far as faith and how much you believe in their ability going forward, or how you would rank them if money was negated.
Yeah.
If what is your
I would go Red Bull just because of the typically dominant performance of Max Verstappen. He's not typically winning by 2 or 3 seconds. It's this is his race because his car worked.
Exactly. It's the lead he normally has
right.
shrunk.
And with that,
but
like we talked about before, Sergio Perez, he's consistently strong. I think I think Ferrari is a solid second because they've got 2 great drivers and they've got a good car.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd go Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes.
Okay. And I agree with you.
Okay.
I do not see. I think Red Bull. I think the data point that Max Verstappen had a brake fire is nothing on him. It's nothing on the team.
Exactly.
So we can't. So that being said, what worries me more than Max Verstappen having a brake fire is the fact that Sergio Perez couldn't get past McLaren and he couldn't get past Ferrari.
Absolutely, I see that.
So, and it's not a dig. It's just okay. So those 2 cars seem to be a little separated. But also the only reason he was back there, the data point is not that he came in 5th. The data point was that he could not pass them.
Yep.
So that is an interesting thing to realize. So as long as he qualifies,
well, he will stay.
What I said about last season, what I said earlier this season is that we want Red Bull to qualify bad so they can pass everybody.
Yeah, no.
It won't happen anymore.
No,
that at least they won't get past McLaren. They won't get past Ferrari. So, here's the official standings. We have Mercedes in the lead, constructor points.
Really?
In fantasy constructor points. Ferrari is in the lead. Sorry, not Mercedes. I misspoke. I'm sorry. That look on your face. If you're not watching the video, Ben looked at me like, dude,
I was not a math major, but there was something fundamentally wrong with
about
that.
Okay, something flawed. So Ferrari, the red team, the scarlet red Ferrari,
yes,
they are in the lead with 223 fantasy points.
And that makes sense to me. Last episode, you briefly, there was so much to talk about last episode, but there was a brief moment where you said, Ferrari has turned in consistently strong performances. They've been among the top in every race.
Yeah.
And so I mean that makes all the sense in the world.
It does. Number 2 is Red Bull.
Sure.
At 211 points. So, if you take 211, add the 20 points that Max Verstappen lost from getting a DNF.
Right.
Not taking into account all the points he would have gotten when he came in first.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's an easily 45-point swing there from Max Verstappen getting first to him getting a DNF. But we won't pretend those possibilities. I just only like to look at as soon as Max Verstappen came in 20th instead of DNFing, then, again, never mind the fact that he would have lost all those points or whatever. As soon as he had gotten a 0 instead of getting a negative 20, then Red Bull Racing would be at 231. They would be first.
And that's where we have to look ahead a little bit too and realize Ferrari will get a DNF or 2 or 3 or 5 over the course of the remainder of this season.
Just like Red Bull will continue to get more.
Yeah.
So I put them I agree with you. I think Red Bull's better. Like right now, I would put Red Bull in my category, in my little ladder.
Sure.
Red Bull's still number 1 just because they have Max Verstappen and there's not a big enough.
But they do not have the lead right
They do not have the lead in this moment because we're coming off a Max Verstappen DNF
and
a Sergio Perez 3 grid place penalty. Then number 3 is McLaren, you're right, with 131 points.
Okay.
So there is a 100-point difference between Ferrari and McLaren right now after 3 races.
I just, on that note,
yeah,
one thing that I'm enjoying about McLaren is Oscar Piastri is not. He's not lagging, he's not.
Absolutely not.
He's not Norris, but he's holding his own.
He really is.
So it's the overall team is strong because of him, I would say. And so, given how young he is, and how much he's not in the spotlight compared to Lando Norris, I'm trying to look at the price difference between the two right now.
So Oscar Piastri had 54 points, has 54 points total. Lando Norris has 47. So he has more points going into the season. So I don't have the cost updates for next week yet.
Sure.
But going into this last race.
Oh, here we go. So
do you have now?
Yeah. So Oscar is 19.7 million, right?
Okay.
And where is Lando?
So Oscar went up 0.7 million from last week.
Okay, and Lando is 23.5.
So he went up $500,000 from last week.
So again, though, like that's still almost
0.3 and then 0.5. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong column.
Almost a $4 million difference between the two.
Yeah,
and so dollar for point for dollar. Yeah. So I think if you could do a lot worse than spending $20 million on Oscar.
And that's a very good way to look at it. Whether you want to go Oscar or you want to go Lando Norris, I think they're pretty much a dead heat right now because in any race, any one could do better than the other. They're a solid team. Just like with Ferrari, officially Carlos Sainz has less points, but he also has one race less than Charles Leclerc.
That's true.
I think Carlos Sainz is your better driver getting you more points. That being said, it's still very early in the race. So for me, I have one team with Perez, one team with Sainz, one team with Leclerc.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I'm spreading it out because you never know race to race what it's going to be, right? So now I'm spreading out I'm kind of taking the average of it. So regardless of which Ferrari wins, one of my teams does really well.
Yeah.
But as soon as I go all for Sainz and then he crashes, now all of my teams are out. And I'm doing that strategy, the money market strategy, if that's the right way for me to say it, the mutual fund strategy.
Sure.
Because it's early in the season and they're still getting things sorted.
Yep.
What do you think about that strategy before we get, and this will be a pretty good segue into your teams. What do you think about that strategy? Because one way to look at it is as soon as, Carlos Sainz is ultra dominant, Carlos Sainz should be the lead driver on all of them. But if he crashes, then I'm all around screwed. Or do you go, each team has a different lead driver and pretty much the same core and same constructors? But
I think ultimately that depends on what your priorities are. Are you looking to have three solid teams, or do you have kind of your team one that you're going to go all in and really swing for the fences every week on?
So I'm right now for the dog days. My strategy has always been to kind of figure out what's working best and apply that to all the teams.
Yeah.
And right now there's not like Ferrari. It makes me think that Ferrari is, really strong and I should have Ferrari in charge of all of them.
Sure.
But I also don't feel right about like Sergio Perez. If it wasn't for that penalty, he could have very easily won.
Yeah. Well, and that's where this has been. I'm sorry about the noise. If you guys heard that, I just hit my boom mic.
He's headbutting the mic. He's swinging the microphone
rookie
around.
Podcaster move here. When I put my three teams together, I initially employed three very different build mentalities, and by week 2, I realized two of them sucked.
Yeah,
and so part of me wanted to kind of stick with it to see if maybe things worked out better over time for talking points. But my survival instinct kicked in, and my teams are much more similar than they were before because by week 2 there were clearly smarter constructor choices to make.
Absolutely,
there are clearly foundational moves that will either kill you right off the bat. There's not a lot of middle ground here is what I'm trying to say. And so I get having one of each of the three top tier non-Max Verstappen drivers on each of your teams. But to your point, I think you're going to end up having three very similar, generally strong teams as a result. Exactly. So if that's what you're going for, consistent performance, it's it's like stacking your baseball team with multiple solid batting average players as opposed to your one guy who's just gonna just knock the ball out of the park every time, or strike out. and nothing in between. So
and I agree. So I had for my team. So the number one team, the team one in all of our accounts is the team one that you can actually win prizes with.
Yeah.
Right. But all the teams are all ranked and all compete. So in the end, it doesn't matter. Unless you're trying to be the number one team in the world,
sure,
it really doesn't matter too much. So for me, I use the no negative chip because I put on my team number one, I put Carlos Sainz in, but I put a no negative on him because I didn't know if I was very concerned
about his performance out of the hospital bed.
Coming out of the hospital. So I kept Ferrari.
Yeah.
But my other teams had Perez and had Leclerc as the lead drivers.
Gotcha.
But so that was my team one. My team two did it. And so that worked out really well for me. I saved some points because I ended up being 20 points better with that team too. But I ended up wasting my no negative for one of my teams. And so to your point, my teams are going to basically be identical with a strong Haas core with both Mercedes and Red Bull constructors. And where they're going to differentiate is whether or not if I'm going to have RB with Tsunoda and Ricciardo, if I'm going to have Logan Sargent on them and things like that. But my teams very quickly stratify out and basically advance because the standard week to week to week, you got to be whether you go back and forth between Sainz or Leclerc, sure, but you can as soon as by moving them around kind of based on your gut, not your gut, but my gut.
Sure.
As soon as I'm moving them around kind of based on my gut, and I always use one of my moves, well, then as soon as something no kidding happens, then I'm in a place where I'm kind of hamstrung with my moves.
I gotcha. Hey, so, I've got a question. You're talking about your no negative chip.
Yeah.
And I think this speaks to the mentality behind your use of your power ups and your chips. Do you have any regrets about using your no negative chips on Sainz?
No, because I used it since it goes for the full team. My Red Bull Racing got me 52 points on that team instead of the 32.
Yeah.
Because the way the no negative works is it's not no net negative. It's anything that gives you a negative point throughout the whole season for constructors and for drivers doesn't count against you.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So as soon as with Max Verstappen, I had Max Verstappen's great qualifying.
Yeah.
But as soon as he got a DNF, I didn't take that negative 20.
Oh, cool. Okay. So my point here is that
it worked out for
sounds
me. It
like
wasn't planned.
Yeah. No, it sounds though like you use your chips more as insurance policies.
For the no negative, absolutely.
Okay.
For the no negative, absolutely.
As opposed to, I've got Logan Sargent. He had 12 DNFs last season. There's a good chance he will DNF. I will use it on him.
Correct. And the reason why is you only have one for all 24. So you have to use the chips. And we can talk about the chips because I have an entire plan of how I'm using all of them.
Okay.
Or most of them.
That sounds like a full episode.
A full episode, that's true.
Because I think there are some insurance policy chips and there are some max me out chips.
Yeah.
They absolutely can feel wasted even if they don't hurt you.
Well, think about it. If you did this last week, and if you use a Limitless chip, if you use Limitless in Australia, then sure, you got Max Verstappen. So who'd you get? You got both Ferraris, both Red Bulls.
Yeah.
And you probably got Lando Norris.
Yeah.
Right? Well, guess what? You probably did your 2X, your DRS driver as Max Verstappen. Maybe you did it with one of the Ferraris.
Of course you do it on Max, though. I mean, come on.
Well, that means you got negative
40 points. And your constructor.
20. Yeah, so because you use your Limitless chip, you actually took 60 points in the teeth.
Yeah.
Right? So it didn't work out. So Limitless is an offensive chip. Limitless is you're feeling good, everyone's feeling great, and you should not have used your Limitless this week because it's not a sprint weekend.
Yeah.
Because in sprint weekend, there's another 30% of points available. So you're leaving points on the table if you use your Limitless or you use, like that, or your 3X chip. If you use those,
okay. So this is in the coming weeks. We definitely need to have a breakdown episode where we have a tier list. Mm-hmm. I think a tier list and then a categorization of chips because I think understanding the capabilities that those give you, as well as the defensive opportunities that are there.
Oh yeah, I'd love to talk about.
Will totally, I think, can make or break someone within their personal league and within the international rankings.
Yeah, and it's a not rookie move, but it's gambling to use them this early.
Oh,
so
sure.
If you look at the top scoreboards, everyone's like, oh, look, this person's so far ahead. Yeah, the people in the front are the people who use their Limitless on week 2, which is the first week you can do it, and then they use their 3X chip week 3 for Ferrari.
Though I do get the strategic element of using some of those early, where you've got an entire season of stats to go off of, and then week 1 happens, and to kind of dip your toe in the water of, are they still who they were last year?
That's true.
And if they appear to be that,
then go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah.
And so I think that can work, but yeah, to your point, every season's completely different. So.
And to answer your question directly, I have no regrets using the no negative, because it ended up working for me. That there was a serious DNF that I didn't take.
Yeah.
Which, as soon as you use your no negative and it saves you 20 points, that's what you're looking for.
No,
right?
It's
with Carlos Sainz, man, I was waiting for him to, because you have to use the chip before qualifying. I was waiting for him to start bleeding out in the cockpit.
Right.
I was waiting for him to pull 5 lateral Gs and have to retire from the race or whatever, right? Like, I was waiting for that to happen. Did I think it was going to? No. If so, I would have replaced Ferrari if I thought there were huge issues. But I was like, you know what? If there's a time to use it, it needs to be a place where I'm really strong with what I'm doing, but I might not work out.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to do it. It didn't. One of my teams.
And there's nothing wrong with having an outcome where it's, well, this didn't end up protecting me, but I wasn't an idiot for thinking the way I thought.
But so let's go ahead and jump in, because we keep talking about everything else. But so let's go ahead and talk. So, so I'm looking at your stuff right here. So newbie alpha, right?
Yeah. Let me go back to my teams. Here we go. So it was a week of highs and a week of lows for me. So newbie alpha. I've got Charles Leclerc as my driver. Yeah, I gave him my 2X, so he got me 76 points.
Great.
Woo! Logan Sargent, I'd already done a transfer. I'm trying to remember what that was from last week to this one, but I was already at negative 10 points, so I didn't want to move away from Logan Sargent, even though it turns out he wasn't driving. So 0 points there. Kevin Magnussen, Haas got me 8 points. I had Esteban Ocon, 0 points. Yay, Alpine. And then I had Zhou Yu, got me 4 points with Kick Sauber.
Yep.
And my constructors were Red Bull, which only got me 32. It wasn't their week.
Yeah.
And then Ferrari got me 92, because you got P1, P2, man.
The only takeaway from this, like, I see nothing wrong with what you did.
Yeah.
Like, because there's a certain amount of, we've talked about ad nauseum. There's a certain amount of just slop of, hey man, this guy's weak, not this guy's weak, whatever. The 2 gambles you had was Ocon and Zhou Yu. I think the fact that he got 4 points now is, I think there's a big enough sample size for him. So he has Bahrain, he had 11. Saudi, he had -2, but that was just because he hit the wall in practice.
Yeah.
And he didn't make qualifying again, but he still qualified and did well. It was he missed qualifying, started in the pits, did well, and then he came out with 4 points. So on the races he doesn't crash, he gets you between 11 and 4 points.
Right.
I think he's still a strong guy to have on your team. Esteban Ocon, man, stay away from Alpine, dude. And this is on me too. I had Ocon on one of my teams just because, like you, I didn't want to take the negative 10 points.
Yeah.
I figured he would not hurt me 10 points worth.
Right.
Well,
and I think the one bummer here too is one of my early transfers that I got on this team. I think I got rid of Yuki Tsunoda because he's just so inconsistent, and of course he gets points. So,
but again, is for you, and I can answer this myself. I'm not trying to put you on the spot,
sure,
but I kind of am.
No, that's why we're here.
Is RB prospect or suspect? Not Red Bull Racing, the actual Red Bull, but baby RB. Are they prospect or suspect?
I'm going to say suspect at this point.
Yeah.
Yuki can get points. He can also absolutely not. So I do not feel confident when he is on my team in terms of him earning me anything or being a liability.
Yeah.
So I will remain avoiding him unless I can see consistent performance from him. And then the Daniel Ricciardo experiment, I haven't seen, he hasn't made much of a blip yet. Again, his cost was low, which is great, but he hasn't done much to to stand out in any meaningful or point driving way yet.
Nope, I agree. Yeah.
I would be if he continues to drive the way he has been driving, I would be interested to see if he remains with RB, or if this was he showed he can still drive and he was given another chance.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other people who want that chance, especially like Bearman. You know.
Yeah. No, and I concur. For me, they're still suspect too, and specifically with Yuki Tsunoda, because in Bahrain he had -1, Saudi Arabia had -1, Australia he had 11. When there was 4 less people at the finish, right, than there is normally. So, like, this is one of the times where I'm looking at his result and going, okay, fine. And with Daniel Ricciardo, 5 points in Bahrain, nothing in Saudi, 8 points here. Again, when you had your Max Verstappen and your Lewis Hamilton and your George Russell.
Yeah.
And then they didn't even cross the finish line.
Right.
So I'm not as hard against RB as I was last week, just because, okay, when the race gave them the option, they did, like,
sure.
They did do something, right?
Yeah.
They're not like Alpine where I'm like, man, it was a ballsy move for me to keep Ocon on there, but okay. No,
yeah. So with this team, the only major change I can see, and until after free practice next race, is drop Ocon and either go full Williams or full Haas based on recent performance.
Yeah, I'm going to be taking it the full Haas way, and then deciding how I feel about Williams.
Sure.
Like, I'm not going to make the change to your point until after FP3.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm leaning much more towards Haas than. RB Dragon Fruit.
RB Dragon Fruit, man. So again, this was the team that week 1 started all Red Bull and all RB, and that has since transmogrified into something completely different. But I did keep Max Verstappen just because I wanted to have a team with him on it.
Yeah.
Because last year it was Max or nothing.
Yeah.
So this time that burned me hard. My total, my point total for this week with that team is 63 points. Oof. And here's the rundown: Max Verstappen 2x. So that's fun. So,
but for what it's worth, you only took -20 points with him because of how well he did in.
Right.
Yeah. And qualifying, he gave him 10 points. Race not classified, he got -20 for a -10 total.
But here's where we talk about the fundamental rule of you need 2 strong constructors. I've got Red Bull Racing, which got 32 points, and I've got Aston Martin, which got me 35 points. Also, it was another no-show Logan Sargent team, so 0 points there. Kevin Magnussen
don't think
from
hurts
Haas.
you.
It's one of those. It could have been worse, and if I had dropped him for someone else, right now I only have 1.9 million in cap space on this team. So what would I have traded him for that would have netted me more than 1 or 2 points?
Yeah.
And again, I was already at my transfer limit there, so I would have lost points if I dropped
for sure.
Sargent, and then again Zhou Yu, and then Albon, which got me my my collective driver points. This is depressing. Was -2 because I got Max at -20 points. I've got Alexander at 4. I've got Zhou Yu at 4, and I got Kevin Magnussen at 8. So that sucked. Yep. So let's move on from that depressing.
We'll move
team.
away from that. Yeah,
we don't need to
the
look at that anymore.
Stathams.
The Stathams, which again was my driver heavy at the expense of everything else team, and over the 2 weeks it has transmogrified into a more consistent team. I totaled 154 points. I had Ocon again because I'm an idiot. My good driver was Sergio Perez, who I had my 2x on. So he got me 44 points.
Not bad.
Logan Sargent, he's on all 3 of my teams. It hurt myself. And then I don't know how this happened, but I've got both Kick Sauber drivers. But you know what? They got me 6 points. And Zhou Yu had 4 and Valtteri Bottas had 2, and then my constructors were Ferrari at 92 points, which is what saved me, and then Red Bull Racing at 32, which is great. Which is just the kind of it was the freak week for them.
Yeah.
So not great, not terrible, but man, Dragon Fruit died on the vine.
Here is a question. Here's a thought experiment. How much does Kick Sauber have to be worth before you put both of the drivers on your teams? Just because their value is so little.
Yeah,
that anything they get will put you in the green.
Here's the thing, that's the thing. They are not the sexy choice, but I did get 6 points with them, as opposed to if I had Ocon and who's the other guy with
Pierre Gasly.
Pierre Gasly, they're both far more expensive, and they would have gotten you nothing
Yeah.
or maybe 2 or 3 points also. So they're not the worst. They're not the worst filler team. As far as being a competitive team with their pit issues, they're not going to do much. So I'm sorry, I'm not answering your question at all.
Well, you kind of did. You did.
So their dollar value,
for me, it's $3 million.
Oof.
If they would cut their value in half right now, then I would put both of them on my team. I put Valtteri Bottas specifically on my team with a smile.
Gotcha.
Because right now, and here's a very horrible stat, which they say stats aren't. You got to be careful how you look at stats and how you interpret them.
Oh yeah, it's
right
super
now.
Manipulable.
Valtteri Bottas, and here's me manipulating the stat. Right now, Valtteri Bottas has 1 point all season. Guess what? Guess how many points Lewis Hamilton has?
How many?
-1.
Wow.
Let me double check, and then that's me from me crunching my stats here. Let me look at. Let me go.
But I mean, and again, it's one of those. The season is 3 weeks old, and he got a DNF.
Exactly, which is
this
why
week,
you have.
Which is why he has negative.
Yeah, which is why he's. Let me go. Let me find him. Where'd he go?
So I guess to right size that a little bit, what is if you have this information immediately available right now? I'm staring at Paul and he's got 3 laptops surrounding him. He's in like full 90s movie hacker mode.
Oh, I really am.
You're like you need to be tapping on all 3 keyboards and going like I'm
exactly.
in.
Right.
But do you have the information available? What is the highest point amount that Lewis Hamilton has gotten in a single race this season?
Yeah, I do have that. Let me scroll down to. There he is, Lewis Hamilton. So, start of the season, the highest points he has gotten for any one race this season is 12.
Okay, that's not bad. Because right now, I had both Kick Sauber drivers.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm an old man and I've got to adjust my chair here. Both Kick Sauber drivers were on my team and they got me 6. So, I don't know what their greatest right now you said Valtteri Bottas has a cumulative total of 1 point.
Total of 1.
So he got 2 today, which means going into this race he was at a cumulative total of -1,
which is where Lewis Hamilton's sitting right now.
So I would still argue that I would rather have Lewis Hamilton
absolutely
on my team.
Right.
But yeah, to your point, the stat is like wow for the dollar value difference of Valtteri Bottas and Lewis Hamilton. Why wouldn't you go Valtteri? But it's because week to week he's taking up a valuable chair on your team, and he's going to give you very little, if anything, for that.
Yeah.
Versus Hamilton's bad week. But that being said, Mercedes' reliability has been lousy.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't. I think I would avoid both of them like the plague moving forward.
Exactly. No, I'm 100% with you.
I'd be much more comfortable going 2 Williams cars on one team or 2 Haas cars on one team. Which, again, could you have paid me to say that last season?
Nope.
No.
But I'll do it now.
Yeah.
And that's a very important thing here is. I think a lot of what's going on with Williams is all the hype and the drama and the hubbub and stuff like that. Like right now, I have nothing positive to say about Williams, but that's just because of everything that went on with Albon crashing, then taking Sargent's car, and then blah, 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 blah. If you look at just the numbers, Williams doing fine. They're a strong team. They're strong people to have. Alexander Albon had, I just navigated away from him. Here he is. Alexander Albon had 0 points in Bahrain, 6 in Saudi, and 4 in Australia. And Logan Sargent had 10 points before he was set down in Australia. So right now, if you were to have both Williams on there's 20 points over 3 races. There's 20 points, and multiply 3 times 7 is 21. 3 times 8 is 24. 20 points times 8. There's how many points you can get from them for their season. You shouldn't have them as a constructor because that's a waste of space. But having them as just your standard rank and file drivers. Even with all the drama and the heartburn going on, I don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah. I gotcha.
So, okay, thank you for talking to us about your teams.
Yeah, man.
That we need to come up with some good catch lines and stuff like that to talk about that. I was just thinking, I was like, yeah, man, we should be like on the radio station whenever like one of the people's like, hey, here's my update. They're like, oh, cool, thanks, bro, and like, yeah, no problem.
Oh, I got you.
Like a little bit, we can work with that.
Yeah, so I think what we need as we get smarter at this, we need segment names.
Oh, we shouldn't instead of us just sitting here talking about everything.
No, I mean, again, because I think we're finding consistencies, and we're starting to get our rhythm a little bit. But it's I think this segment should be just called like "Learn from Ben's Failures." So anyway, this is a blast. Though. I'm having so much fun with this. The only other thing I can wax poetic on is, man, I say we get rid of sprint races, and maximize F1 appeal by jumping into completely different interest realms. Like, instead of a sprint race for points, you should have like other life skills or other random interests. Like, all the drivers have 40 minutes to build a monthly budget for day-to-day living.
Yes.
How would they do? And then just like have a financial analyst score them accordingly, or have them like all, they have 15 minutes to create 30 balloon animals for a birthday party of just awful children,
and then have like their judges be a panel of 8-year-olds.
Yeah,
to come in and judge them based on their
or just balloons. Like a cooking show segment. And some of them I think would just crush it and like have a follow-on career.
Yeah,
and then other ones would be like, this is BS. This is so stupid. And it would be, but man, just like the Olympics thing we talked about a couple weeks ago, I would watch every sprint because it'd be like, what are they going to have them do this week?
Oh, that'd be so great.
Yeah.
But all right, so I don't think we have anything else to talk about really right now.
That was way tangent. I'm sorry,
but no, that's perfectly okay. Japan is the next race.
Yeah,
I need to do some race track intelligence, and maybe we can talk about what to expect since we have 2 weeks off.
Oh,
yes,
again, okay.
Yeah, we have the next race. Is we have 10 days before the next race.
Yeah. Okay. So we need a chip analysis, and then I think at some point we need to do a racetrack analysis, because especially when you're seeing the differences come out in these cars where McLaren's got that straightaway capability that makes them a real threat. How much more can we dump on Mercedes?
Yeah.
But like how much does the layout of the track either cater to or just mangle the hopes of a team?
No, that's a good point. And if any of you out there listening, you have other topics for segments, you can feel free to hit us up.
Absolutely. We know very little about them, but we will talk about them.
We will absolutely talk about
with
them.
authority.
Balloon animals. There we go.
So.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.
Take care.
Cheers.